And so next we have Matt Davies coming to us live from the UK. He's a leadership advisor, an amazing brand consultant, and a co-host of one of my favorite podcasts out there, the Just Branding podcast with Jacob Cass. He's worked with huge brands and he has written many books, and he is awesome and engaging and charismatic. Matt, welcome. Thank you for joining us. The stage is and the floor is yours, my friend.
Stephen, what a lovely opening. Thank you very much. And I think I should start by thanking Branders Magazine for having me and for putting this this festival on, the Festival of Branding, because I think it's needed out there in the world. So this is going to be fantastic. I'm looking forward to presenting this to you. I'm going to share my screen. And Stephen, as soon as I share it, I will not be able to see you, so I need you to say audibly, it's working, because then I know I can get cracking with it. So let's try this. It did work just now when we trialed it, but I just want to check it's working now. So can you see this? It should have the title of my presentation on it.
It's working.
Oh, happy days. Well, let's get started. Developing a winning brand strategy. Now, yesterday, Rob gave an overview of the branding process. And, you know, it can seem really overwhelming because there's loads of things to do. There's lots to think about. But what I want to really dive in today is something that I think is perhaps the most important part of any branding process, of anybody, as Stephen said, who's looking to build something, to grow a business, to grow an organization, to become known in the world. And that is the strategy that sits behind it. So what we're going to be advocating today is a winning brand strategy, and we'll define that as we go through. But we're really going to be talking about radical differentiation. And I'm going to come on to that, how that can help you grow in your market shortly. But before I do that, I just want to set the scene. I like to kind of make sure that we're all speaking the same language. So I was going to show you one thing. So if I showed you this symbol, my question would be, what does this mean to you? And when I do this with a live audience, sometimes I literally say, raise your hand. What does it mean to you? And some people say, oh, it means, it means trainers. It means running. It means pain, some people say. Other people say the company name, Nike or Nike, depending on how you want to pronounce it. But the point is that all of those answers would be correct. What this symbol does is it represents something bigger than a tick or a swoosh. It represents the meaning behind it. And that meaning can be different for different people, but they will look at that as a symbol, as a label for meaning. Now, is it important how we design things? Absolutely. But I'm going to advocate that it's even more important that before we get to really crafting and worrying about all the typography and the colors and the fonts and all of those things, that we really sit down and have a good hard look at the strategy behind our business and behind our organization. So let's keep going with this theme, though, of definition. So what is a brand, then? It's not just the logo and the fonts. As I've demonstrated, it's beyond that. This is my definition. It's the meaning that people attach to you and your offering. It exists in their hearts and their minds. It is in the eye of the beholder. And that meaning is conjured up a little bit from the logo, but beyond that, it's conjured up by what you actually do, the value you create in the world, the experience that you produce for your customers and potential customers. Branding is the game that I'm in, and everybody probably tuned into BrandersFest is in. What's branding? This is my definition. It's the management of that meaning. So we can hang out the right signals, and ultimately that meaning will come into our customer's mind. But the brand really, if we're thinking about it strategically, it's got to sit at the heart of the leadership of an organization or business. It's got to flow, the principles of it, through the culture that we can encourage. We can design culture. We can influence culture within. It's got to go through the products and services. It's got to go through the customer experience. And then right at the end, absolutely important, don't get me wrong, is the look and feel, the logos, the fonts, and the colors in the marketing communications. But that's kind of like the veneer. That's the lick of paint at the end. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that sometimes we can make is that we can sometimes focus on the wrong thing. We can start with the lick of paint before we've actually got the core of what we're about correct. And so what we're about today, what I'm going to speak about today, is that. How do we get that strategy right so that we really carve a name for ourselves in our sector, in our marketplace? How do we really stand out? Is it by really focusing on the logo design? Absolutely not. It might help it a tiny bit. But frankly, you can have the world's greatest logo design and you'll never have the world's greatest brand, because brands are the meaning people attach to you. They're not just the lick of paint. In summary, my mentor, Marty Neumeier, put it like this. It's not what we say it is. It's what they say it is. That's your brand. And you know you've done brand strategy right when the things that you say in your workshops and in your kind of your summary of your strategy, when you say those things and you hear them back 6 months later, a year later, not because you or your team are saying them, but because your customers are saying them in feedback to you. That's when you know that you've actually created a powerful, winning brand strategy. It's not what we say it is, it's what they say it is. We can only influence it. So the first thing we've got to do is define it. And that's, I'll come on to that in just a minute. But I want to present to you two issues, two problems, two things that I find that people fall into, two traps that I find businesses fall into. As Stephen said, I'm a consultant. I'm often wheeled in to organizations at C-suite level to really help them untangle themselves from either one of these two traps. They're both related, actually. So on the left-hand side, we've got the brand trap. And on the right-hand side, we've got the mind trap. The brand trap exists inside the company. The mind trap is something that exists inside the minds of our customers out there in the big bad world. So we're going to start with the mind trap, okay? Just because I think it's important that we understand how the human mind operates. Now, if you want to grow your business, you want to make sure, usually, that you're getting awareness out there to more people, to the right people. Or you want to kind of make sure that you're upselling to existing people. But either way, you've got to get into their minds. You've got to make sure that they understand what you're offering and why it's amazing for them and valuable for them to choose you. The problem we've got, of course, in our kind of fast-paced social media, digital AI-driven world is that people have less and less time, but they have more and more choice. And this is a problem for customers. This is a problem for you if you're looking to buy anything, a product or a service, because basically you know, the less time you have, but the more choice you have, it's hard for you to make a decision. It's really tricky. Now, just to illustrate this, this report was done by Scott Brinker. I don't know if you can easily see it on the screen, but basically every year since 2011, he's documented the marketing tech landscape, right? So it's super interesting, just generally. This is how it started in 2011. There's about 150 brands in various categories within that sector. You don't need to see all of them, but you just get the idea. There's about 150. Fast forward to last year, and there are now 14,000 brands within the same sector. And you can hardly make out on the screen anything about them at all. So Scott Brinker's work obviously is great and really interesting if you're in that sector, but it's a general principle that we're finding that marketplaces are getting busier and busier and busier, harder and harder to carve out why some customers should buy you when you've got so many competitors globally competing with you. Now, if I was to say to you, look at these dots, and say, well, which one of these stands out? You'd probably notice that one of the dots isn't actually a dot, it's actually a star. And so your eye would be drawn towards that. Why? Because it's different. And so we notice what's different. There's obviously, I'm not a psychologist, as you can appreciate, but there's a load of psychology around the fact that the human mind, it simplifies things down, and it kind of just, it's called, Max Wertheimer, he's invented the law of Pragnanz, the law of consciousness, the law of simplicity, as he calls it. And it basically asserts that every stimulus pattern is seen in such a way that the resulting structure is as simple as possible. So what we actually do, as in our minds, is we look at a pattern, we look at various offerings. If it gets too complicated, we simplify things. We group elements into a more organized form in our mind. This is called perceptual grouping. And we do this because, frankly, we can't be bothered with the complexity and unfamiliarity of having to sort through all the thousands of options that might be available to us. So you imagine you're a marketing manager and you've got to choose a product from that marketing tech stack that we showed you, from that category for your marketing tech stack. You haven't got the time to analyze 300 potential products for your customer relationship management system. You just have not got time. So what you do is you simplify things down. You might simplify them to 3. How are you going to choose your top 3? You're going to be influenced by what you've heard. You're going to maybe look at a few blog posts. You're going to see what's out there. You're going to have a quick look at some websites, but you're not going to analyze all of them. You're only going to really analyze the ones that are already on your radar or on the radar of the people close to you who recommend that you look at them. Because you generalize quite quickly that the rest probably are not worth looking at because nobody's mentioned them to you right now. So the point here is that the mind trap is a trap where, in our customers' minds, if we're not standing out for the right reasons, we're just going to get lost in a sea of sameness. You see, this is how the human mind works, is my simplified version, right? So first of all, we look to solve problems in our life. We filter anything that's useless. We do notice, though, what's different or useful. And usually we kind of collect those things in our mind. So we have these little categories in our mind, these little boxes. And we kind of think, okay, I know, for example, that if I want a sugary sweet drink, that Coca-Cola is the one. And I put that in my box for sugary sweet drink. And it's very rare that I will ever change that. So Coca-Cola becomes the dominant brand in sugary sweet drink in Matt's mind. And I will resist changing that because I'm risking, if I do change that, I'm risking the fact that I might order another drink, another brand that doesn't fulfill what I know Coca-Cola can fulfill. I'm familiar with it. It makes life simple for me. That's it, done. So the aim of the game from a strategy perspective is to own a category in the customer's mind, to become that number one for the problem or the challenge or the thing that they're trying to achieve in their mind. That's the mind trap, because if you are not doing that, if you're not focused on that, then you're going to fall into that mind trap where customers have no reason to notice you at all. And they're not going to try you because it's inconvenient for them to do so. They're going to stick with what they know, and you're not going to get that growth that you really want. So that's the mind trap. And as I say, closely related to that is the brand trap. Now, this is more internal. This is more something that I see companies fall into personally. What do? Well, what happens is companies typically, they copy whoever is number one in their category. I don't know if you've seen this before, but like you can generally, I do a lot of research for clients trying to stand out. And what tends to happen is you say, okay, what sector are you in? Let's have a look at the main competitors in that sector. And it's often not surprising to find pretty much they're all blue and white, and they all use the similar pictures, and they all say the very similar things. And the reason for that is because they're all trying to copy either IBM or someone like that who they perceive as being number one. And it feels kind of safe, right? If it's worked for number one, it's going to work for us as well. And no one's going to get fired for copying someone who's already successful because it feels safe. It feels like a normal, logical thing to do. But the problem is that number one space has already been occupied. So we need to really think about that. Newcomers fail to penetrate because everything starts to look the same. And number one is still number one. People still are occupying it in the mind of their customers. So the mind traps work, and now the business is falling into the brand trap. So typical brands, do kind of think like that. They copy what they know. And then that leads, as we've mentioned, to categories where basically people are all saying pretty much the same thing. They might sort of claim that they're a bit better than somebody else, but we're the best. No, we're the best. No, we're the best. We're the best and the cheapest. We'll win by being the best by trying harder. Who's heard things like that? And that last one about being the cheapest is where this ends, because what happens is the category becomes overloaded, and what brands try and start to do is compete on price. It's a race to the bottom. And so from a consumer's perspective, when they look at the category, it looks a bit like this. A market where everybody's sort of overlapping. It all looks pretty much the same. And so we're just going to go back to whatever convenient way of thinking we had before, because it's just too complicated. We've got no time and we've got too much choice. So how do we break through that if we want to grow? Well, that's where the beautiful subject, my subject, comes in, of brand strategy. What is a brand strategy? This is my definition: a strategic plan to define, notice this, the unique value we will offer the market. In other words, we're going to think about the meaning that we want audiences to attach to us. It's got to be authentic, it's got to be true, it's got to be considered, but we're thinking about that in the sense that it's of value to our customer. In fact, if we get it right, it's of unique value. In other words, they can't get that value, what we're offering, from anywhere else. That is the hallmark of a good brand strategy, that we know what we stand for, we know why we're different, we know why we're unusual, but we also know that that's of value. And that's really what you're heading for. If you really want to build a business and grow a business, that's what you need to focus on. Yes, logos and fonts are lovely, but if you've not got this piece right, you're going to struggle to scale, you're going to struggle to grow, and because you're going to have fallen pretty much into the brand trap, and then likewise stumbled also then into the mind trap. So this is how I see it working. A lot of businesses have a business strategy at the top. Usually they're asked by their banks or their investors to put together a business plan. And as businesses scale and grow, obviously they become more involved. And really, the business strategy would contain the commercial goals of the business and also the resources and the plan it was going to use to help it get to hit those goals. And then this is where I see then the brand strategy really coming in. It's closely linked to the business strategy because it should influence it, and vice versa, to be honest. What's the brand strategy? It's that strategic plan to manage the meaning the business wants its audiences to attach to its offering, and a definition of the unique value it will offer the market. And then, from understanding strategically how we're going to position our brand, then we should consider actually our marketing. How are we going to take that to market? How are we going to go to market with that message, with that idea, with that narrative, with that story? And how are we going to start generating sales leads from it overall? Now, they're different things. Business strategy, commercial, brand strategy, how are we going to position ourselves overall? Marketing strategy, how are we going to take that and message it out to the market and generate leads? And what I find is often in the businesses I work with, this piece is missing, or it might be there, but it's very poorly defined or not understood, or we're not rallying and aligned around it. So that is a crucial link that we find missing. And we find there's people like marketing managers, for example, and they do an amazing job. But if they haven't got the brand strategy, and that brand strategy being bought into by leadership, they'll find that even though they're going out and pushing this story out there, when they turn around, they'll find their product teams, they'll find their finance teams, they'll find their HR teams behaving in ways that don't align. And so brand strategy should sit, in my view, right at the heart of the leadership team, right at the heart of the business to scale and grow it. And what then it should do is it shouldn't just influence the marketing strategy, it should influence the people strategy, who we're hiring to help us get to where we want to go, the talent that we're getting in, the culture we want to build. It should influence the product strategy. What are we actually making for customers? How are we servicing customers? What's their experience like? How are we packaging all of that? And finally, it needs to also influence the delivery strategy. How are we going to get a customer, a non-customer, right the way through to be a raving fan of ours after working with us and our brand? So you can see how brand strategy is really important if we're going to drive a business forward, if we're going to grow, if we're going to align everybody together. Often I find without that piece, we have leadership teams where everybody's pulling in different directions, there's competing priorities, and no one really can get inspired and excited about where we're going. It's simply about money, and there's nothing wrong with that at C-suite level or investor level, but frankly, nobody else apart from you wants to know that you're going to get rich. Right? Customers don't care about the commercial strategy. What they care about is the value you're going to offer to them. And same with employees. They don't really care that you want to get rich. Yeah, of course, they want to get paid. They want a wage and they want to work somewhere nice. But at the end of the day, they really need something to drive them, to inspire them, to make them excited about what you're doing. Now, when you've got a good brand strategy, it should do a number of things. It should simplify the decision-making for customers. Why should they buy from you? What should they expect? It should simplify things for your employees, your talent out there. Why should they join you? What is it that they're doing there? And most importantly, for leaders, what they're focused on and what they should be doing, right? So that's the benefit of a powerful differentiation strategy. So how do we do this? So as we said, most brands go from being quite typical. We're the best, but where we want to head, if we're doing strategy properly, is that we're the only X that does Y. We're the only brand to do this. You might say, that's pretty hard, Matt, to do. Well, that is hard. That's why it's hard work. You've got to really do that as a leadership team and understand what is it that you're offering that no one else is offering. And then you've got to mobilize around that. And that's when you get real cut through in terms of the brand. So there's kind of like 4 areas that I often like to speak about in terms of positioning your brand powerfully. You've got the company. So there's some context. Why did it begin? What are you doing? What resources have you got available? Who are the people that work for you? What are the leadership ambitions? What's the setup commercially? You've got your customer set. We got to identify them, figure out what they want. How can we really kind of add lots of value to them? What are their pains? We've also got to see what the competitors are doing out there in the market. What are they offering? And how can we make sure that we're offering something unusual? And then all of that is wrapped up in your category that you're operating in the marketplace. And you've got to be aware of all of those things in order to really figure out your brand positioning, figure out why you can do something unusual in this space. And so what you want to do is then create that strategy and then move your business towards it. So you break the brand trap, you stand out from the market, and therefore you break the mind trap, because now you're giving the customer, the ideal customer, reason to notice you, reason to think this is different, a reason to put it in that box in their mind to solve their problem or help them become who they want to become. So that's why this is very important for growth. So how are we going to do this? Well, first of all, this is some advice to you all. Stop copying number 1 in your category. In fact, do the opposite to what they're doing. Look at what they're doing and think, how can we do something very different? You've got to design or define a point of valuable difference. That's a strategic decision at leadership level. You've got to get the word out then, through internally, through your internal comms, through your HR, through your culture, out through your marketing teams. And you've really then got to lean into it and create real value for customers. And then if you've done all of that right, the best thing for you to do is to enable customers to promote it amongst their friends, amongst their peers. That's when you really have done a great thing, when they start saying some of the positive things about you that you want them to. So you've got to try and avoid the brand trap, falling into that trap when you don't focus on the unique value that you could offer, when you focus internally and you try and be safe. It feels safe, but in fact, it's probably the most dangerous thing you can do, because you're going to end up competing on price, you're going to be commoditized, and you're going to be overtaken in the marketplace. So stop following. Start leading. How are you going to lead? Well, you're not just going to be good. You're going to be good and unusual, and you're going to do that in a valuable way. So my question to everybody listening into this talk today is, what makes your brand unusual? In a good way, in a valuable way. Like, anyone can be crazy or stupid or strange, but it's got to be in a valuable way. And then you've got to ask yourself the same question again, but push it further. Like, what makes it really, really unusual in a good way? Because this is the equation. If you've got your brand and you create unique value through it, then that goes into the audience's mind and you become their only choice. You fill that box in their mind and they become loyal and they stick with you because you're creating that value for them. I like to also evolve that a little bit further. I've got 4 big brand questions I like to ask. So why do we exist beyond making money? Who do we exist to serve? How should we show up? And what is our offer? And amongst all of that, you're going to find an area that you're different. It might not be in what you do. You might say, Matt, I'm in a regulated industry. I can't offer something different to somebody else. Okay, well, maybe it's in how you do it then. Maybe you do it faster, quicker, in a more interesting experiential way. Perhaps you serve a particular niche audience in a very focused way. Maybe it's who you serve that makes you different. And you've got to think about these different things in terms of your strategy. But once you get there, what are the benefits? Well, you can charge more for the same products. You can attract more customers. You can cut costs from marketing, recruiting, and PR because you become famous in the category. You can clearly differentiate from competitors. You can align, inspire, and empower teams, and you can increase company value. Now, you might say, Matt, this is all lovely in theory. Give me some examples. Give me some case studies. So I'm going to give you three quick case studies. So have a look at this, right? This is how typical water brands have been showing up for 50 odd years. They all basically look the same. They're offering water in plastic bottles all over the world. That's pretty much what we'd expect from a water brand. Until, of course, 2019, when this company launched, Liquid Death. Immediately, it's weird, right? It's in a can. Immediately, it's strange. It's called Liquid Death. Their idea was to really destroy plastic. That's how they sort of championed it. That's how they leveraged it. They were basically saying, look, aluminium is recyclable, plastic isn't, so we're going to kill plastic. And we're going to do this in a very aggressive, kind of radical way. And so, they've literally flipped the script on what water brands did and then how they showed up. And they've appealed to a whole new category, a whole new audience in that category. They've been doing one of the fun things they did was they do crazy things all the time, but one of the things they did is like a taste test. And if somebody gets it wrong, they get electrocuted live. And it's really, really interesting. They did that with people that were trolling them and saying that their water was rubbish. So they said, okay, if our water's no good, let's test that theory, see if you can do it. And just good fun and crazy fun as well. But they're getting noticed. They're getting cut through. Why? Because they're completely different and unusual. And you say, well, is that just a nice marketing ploy? Well, just the numbers speak for themselves in terms of the money that they're raising, the profits that they're making. And only just recently, earlier this year, you can see they're valued at 1.4 billion. They're not even fully global yet. So it's pretty amazing. So I just think these are a great example of a brand really standing out, really being different. They look more like sort of a lager brand or some sort of energy drink, don't they, than a pure water brand. But they're powerful in their space because they're following those principles of brand. And in fact, in Forbes this year, there was an article written, Liquid Death's billion-dollar valuation stresses the power of brand. And so, that's what they're putting it down to. If you're interested in this, Stephen mentioned I have a little podcast. Check this out. We actually interviewed Jacob and I, Steve Nelson of Liquid Death. His official job title, check this out, is Vice President of Cult Indoctrination at Liquid Death. I just love that. So definitely check that out if you're interested in the Liquid Death story. All right, couple more case studies that won't be as fast. This is another one. So here's what typical car brands look like, for the last 30 or 40 years. Do you know the most popular color that sells for cars? The color is gray. And so as of January 2024, that's still the color of choice for all car brands. They sell more gray cars than any other color. So one brand has stepped up to the plate recently and said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to be different. We're going to carve out a way to stand out in the category. So here's Fiat. They launched No More Grey with a bit of a stunt where they dipped a car completely in orange paint in the middle of Italy, the land of colors. They're an Italian brand. So they were saying, look, we're going to leverage the uniqueness of our background and our heritage. Italy isn't known for grey. We're going to really spread Italianness around the world. And so they completely reorientated their business. No more grey at all. Has it worked? Well, currently, at least earlier this year, the reports where they were growing at a rapid rate. So they stand out. They really do something different. Case study number 3, here's another one. This one is probably less known. So here's a classic accountancy brand, if you like, from here in the UK, in the Midlands, in a little place called Derby in England. And about 1850, this is kind of where they were operating. They had a typical old-fashioned kind of office where there were wood panelings, and it was very dark and musty, and lots of books. And, you know, business owners would go in and have meetings with their accountant to figure out, you know, how they were doing with their accounts. Everything was, you know, at this time it was the Victorian era, and that very much sort of influenced a lot of how the business operated. Everyone, you know, even up until the 90s was wearing suits and ties. It was all very kind of formal, very English. You know, if you know England, you know what I mean. And then in 2003, a non-typical approach was launched by a new set of partners that had come up in the business. They realized that, frankly, they found it quite strange. They were quite young and they'd just been promoted to partners. And they were kind of thinking, well, why are we wearing suits and ties to work? Like, we don't wear this normally. We kind of go down the pub and we're kind of chilled out, and then we get all dressed up for work. Like, this is a bit strange. So what they decided to do was to actually start relaxing that. And as they started to do that, they realized actually a lot of our customers are doing this. So a lot of the young entrepreneurs that were coming through, they weren't wearing suits and ties. They were coming to meetings in trainers and t-shirt. So they realized something was changing here. And they realized, excuse me, that the way that the customer experience was set up was going to be wrong for the future, because they needed the young, exciting, dynamic, risk-taking entrepreneurs to come in and do business with them. So they started to focus on their culture and their client experience. And they believed, and this is from one of their presentations, they believed that that would bring business success. They completely rebranded, as you can see here, not just the veneer. They actually kind of changed internally how they were doing things. A lot of good culture focus. They became hailed as the rebels of accountancy. They build, you know, deep relationships. They invested heavily in their workspace. So this is one of their offices. There's a running track around it. It looks almost like Google. Not what you'd expect from an accountancy firm. They, as I say, did a lot of culture stuff. They want to be different. They then started to attract all the top talent in the local area who were accountants, who were modern, who were forward thinking. They wanted to work for Cooper Parry, and they started to grow at an exponential rate. In fact, I'm not going to go through this, is Aid Cheltenham. These guy is a really amazing chap, Aid. You wouldn't, if you were to meet him, you wouldn't believe that he's the CEO of one of the fastest growing businesses in the UK. Such a lovely, down-to-earth chap. I've had the pleasure of speaking with him on platforms a few times, but he's really supercharged the growth of Cooper Parry. Why? Because he believes it's unusual. You can see the scale here. They're buying places. In fact, this was just today. I looked them up, and a week ago, they've just added 2 new acquisitions in terms of their scaling. I think they're one of the biggest accountancy firms now in the UK, and scaling at a really rapid rate. So there's 3 examples of 3 brands that have differentiated themselves authentically, not just as a veneer, authentically in the market. Now, you might say, this is lovely, Matt. How can we do this? So I've got a couple of quick tips, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this. Remember, you've got to figure out and be acutely aware of these 4 areas: company, customers, competitors, and the category. So what I want you to do is list your brand's key attributes and offerings and compare them against the main competitors. You've got to identify areas where your brand overlaps with competitors, but you might find a few areas where it diverges. And then you can highlight your brand's unique aspects at that point. I'll come on to an exercise to help you do that in a minute. I also think you need to look at your customer journey. Map out the customer journey from awareness to post-purchase. Identify key touch points and interactions that customers have with your brand. Assess them, and then define how you can create unique brand experiences for them. But more than all of that, I'd recommend you get yourself an onlyness statement. So basically, figure out what your competitors are offering and doing, analyze their value propositions, distill what makes your brand different and why customers should choose you over others. So that's where the value comes in. And then I want you to write this statement. Now, I was taught this statement by Marty Neumeyer, who's written a number of books, and I've mentioned him before. He's a bit of a mentor of mine. But I think it's so powerful, right? Our brand is the only blank that blanks. If you can answer that in a true and authentic way that is of high value to customers, you'll find that you'll be able to build a scaling brand that everybody aligns around. So for example, if we took Liquid Death, their owner's statement might be something like this: our brand is the only water beverage that you can buy in a can and makes you feel like a rock star. Car manufacturer Fiat, our brand is the only car manufacturer that refuses to be dull. Our brand is the only accountancy service that embraces the radical entrepreneurial mindset. Now, obviously, I'm doing those myself. I don't know if they would summarize it exactly like that. I think they probably would. But there's the idea at the heart of then everything they've orientated their brand around. It's not just a lick of paint. It's in the offering. It's in the customer experience. It's around everything. There's other onlyness statements that once you see it around. It's all over the place as you kind of become aware of it. Now you might say to me, Matt, I've analyzed all those value propositions. I just can't see how my business is different in the marketplace. And that happens quite a bit when I do these exercises with leadership teams. And if that happens, it's basically time to go to work on the business. You haven't got a veneer problem at that point. You've got a business problem. So I always suggest an exercise. I love workshops, as you can probably tell, with the leadership team called the assumption flip method. What's that? Well, what you do is you brainstorm all the things that are typical and expected from a brand like yours in your category. And then you look at all those things and you look to flip them. What could the opposite be? Rather than being boring and stale like a normal accountancy and very formal, what if we were informal? Rather than selling grey cars, what if we didn't sell any grey cars? You flip to the opposite. And then what you can do if you do that with all of the assumptions, you can grade those together as a leadership team out of 10, like 10 being super valuable to customers, 1 being not valuable at all. Because sometimes when you do this, frankly, you flip something and it's like, that's not of any value whatsoever. That's a silly idea. But other times you flip it and you think, do you know what? That could be something amazing. And then the next step, the final step really is to prototype, test that, and really try and get that out to customers. So I hope you found that interesting. I hope that was inspirational. I hope that was useful. My kind of final leaving message to you is, take this seriously. Your strategy is so important. Manage your meaning. And I want to thank you all very much for joining. Just two other quick slides. If you're interested in this, as Stephen said, we've got a free ebook where I've got a lot of this down, and it's got some of these exercises you can run with your team. It's got free workbooks. So feel free to go through that. It goes into some of the things I've touched on today, really goes into unique value, the brand trap, and it gives you those exercises. I think there's at least 4 workshop exercises that it gives with worksheets. So get that. I'll drop the link in the chat just in a second. And finally, if you were intrigued by some of the things that we had to say, I post on this stuff all the time on LinkedIn. That's where my main platform is. So feel free to jump on there. I've got a book called Storyatogy, which really goes into how storytelling and narrative can help you position your brand and inspire people. We've already mentioned the podcast. And if you are in the brand building space, something that might interest you is I have a global mastermind. We've got about 70 people. We meet every month and we discuss all the latest top issues with brand. And you'd be welcome to join us if you're interested. DM me about that. My website is there. Subscribe for free strategy email updates. And finally, if you are struggling with this and you think, do you know what, Matt, you've touched on something, I could do some help. I do also consult, although I'm super busy at the moment. So bear that in mind. But ping me a message. I'll be more than happy to discuss how we could begin solving any of your challenges. So that is me done, Stephen. I don't know if I went over. I'm sorry if I waffled on. But he's got his shades on. That's a good sign.
I have the shades because you were dropping value bomb after value bomb that I was going like this. There was so much incredible knowledge dropped, Matt. Thank you. No, you're perfectly on time. We got questions. I got a couple questions that we're going to get to, but couple observations from my end. I love the dichotomy of the brand trap and the mind trap and how you just illuminated the problems that happen within it. I think it's such a brilliant way to look at it for entrepreneurs and for founders. I love how you said anyone can be strange, but in a good way. Thank you for validating my life. I loved how you said people getting electrocuted, just good fun. That was
Like, let me clarify, they weren't really hurting people. It was just a very little shock. So
no, I mean I that kind of shocked me a little. Just good old fun.
Should have clarified.
And the Cooper Parry case study. Wow. Like I love when like something seemingly so dry in B2B just flips the coin over and is radically different. So thank you for sharing that. Um, got a couple questions. I'm just gonna dive in from the audience. We had some great engagement. So this is a great one from Chloe. Do
Hi,
you
Chloe.
think timing plays a role in the power of your message being seen? So, for example, Liquid Death releasing their water in a time when people are advocating for change. Do you think it's worth also analyzing the trends within society when you're creating or releasing a brand?
Oh, that's a great question. So yeah, I think if you get out in front of the parade early, and you're riding the crest of the wave, to use a couple of analogies there, obviously that's going to help you really expand at a rapid rate. Um, I would say it's hard to do that though, right? Imagine you're a B2B brand, right? Like that's really tricky, but it's important to understand the zeitgeist of the industry. Um, like I'll give you a quick example. Like I'm working at the moment with a luxury jewelry brand, right, from Switzerland. And we're looking at the market, and I can't give too much away, but basically what we discovered was even in luxury, the term personalization is really a bit of a joke. Everything's pretty much mass produced. If you want to personalize something, you can maybe put your initials on it or choose a different color. But frankly, it's still the mass produced product. And we noticed this as a trend. So my client, looked at that. I thought, what if we flip the script? What if we could do something completely unique and completely personalized? And so I can't tell you more on that until another time when we're out in the wild. But it just shows that yes, you need to understand the zeitgeist of the time. You need to understand the attitude of luxury, in this case, luxury goods. And then you can think outside of that. So I agree. Yeah, a great thing. Plastic was a problem. Liquid Death came along and said, we're going to start to address that, in a very unusual and unique way. Great question.
Yeah, no, that it is a brilliant question. And I know in my work, I often look at the cultural and societal implications a brand is going to have. And it's one thing when you're designing a brand, but if the brand is mature and in market. So, for example, I worked with Holland America Cruise Line. How do you stay relevant? Well, you got to look at the cultural zeitgeist. You have to try to understand what is society telling you about not just the category, but just travel and the different ways people are traveling post-COVID. So you always want to take a look at culture and the role society plays. I was just informed, just to let everyone know who's asking, the link to Matt's ebook will be in the post session follow up. So if you didn't write it down, if you didn't grab it anywhere, don't worry, we will be sending it to you. Question from Roger. What advice to emerging entrepreneurs who have to wear all hats when starting a business? When does brand strategy matter? That's a valid question. All us entrepreneurs are wearing 1,000 hats.
Yeah, that's an interesting. Oh, there's another hat. So, look, this is the truth, right? I think if you're the founder in your early stage, okay, something's broken in the world and you're trying to fix it, right? Because otherwise you wouldn't bother starting a business. You probably understand the unique value that you're trying to bring to the market. You probably understand what your most passionate customers want from you. And so you have that in your head, right? The problem is that as you start to scale and you start to hire new people, and then you start to pass people in corridors that you don't know the name of and that you didn't hire but work for you, that suddenly you realize that, hold on, this is not as easy as it used to be, because I used to be able to manage the meaning because it was just in my mind and I understood it innately. But now I'm scaling, now I'm growing. I can't actually do that without getting everybody else internally on board. So one of the things that I believe is that brand strategy, first and foremost, is, yes, it's an intellectual thing, but it's an internal thing, and it has to be understood by everyone, from the It's got to be simplified so that, you know, the receptionist understands it and the CFO understands it. Yes, CFOs can understand brand strategy. I really believe that. But everybody has to understand it. And then you need to orientate your operations around it, like I hinted at. So, you know, how you set goals, how you measure things, how you target things. It's got to influence that. Yes,
Yeah.
commercially as well. We're not a charity, but it's got to influence everything. So to boil it right back, to rein it right back to what you were saying, if I was a founder like you, I would try and document it. So yes, it's in my head, but I try and get it down. I try and just you've probably got a sales deck or something anyway. And I try and recruit, when I recruit people, I try and make sure that I onboard people into the brand, into the positioning, into what we're trying to do, into why we are different. And if you can do that, as you scale, you know, you can start then making sure that everybody is pulling in the same direction, but it's hard to do.
It is, and this is where consultants come in to help steer the ship, right? To help with that long-term plan to win.
Exactly. Often I'm wheeled in though when it's, you know, all splintered and everyone's sort of backbiting and everyone's got egos and there's politics, and, you know, we need something to piece it back together to get everybody pointing in the right direction again. And that's what brand can really help to do. If you haven't got it, you can bring it in to really help further that growth.
So your onlyness statement would be, I am the only brand strategist that takes hot mess brands and turns them into a quilt that you can sell or something like that.
I'll take that. Nice.
We had another question. This was from Jane. What's like the biggest challenge a brand might face when trying to stand out in a crowded marketplace?
So going back to the comment I made about being like brand strategy is kind of an internal thing. I actually honestly believe that the hardest thing for a business to do is to orientate itself around a radical change that nobody's seen in the industry before. And the reason for that is that it's high risk. It's very risky to really lean into it. If you look at what Cooper Parry has done, if you look at what Liquid Death done, we can all stand back and go, wow, that's obvious. It kind of makes sense. But actually to persuade investors, to persuade shareholders, to get everybody comfortable with that, that's the hardest bit to get them on board. So really, though, my argument usually is, okay, if you are not doing that, then what's going to happen? You're gonna become stagnant. You're going to become part of the commodity in that sector. You've got to be thinking about this to survive. So it feels safe not to do it. It feels risky to do it. But in fact, in my view, it's the opposite way around. It's actually risky to sit in and try and copy everybody because, frankly, you're gonna crash to the bottom.
Yeah, like you said, it's a race to the bottom. A couple more questions. And I haven't read this one yet. This is from Amir. What if a business act for a long time without any brand strategy, and there was some else? So what if a business was around for a long time without any brand strategy and they were somehow successful?
Yeah, that can happen, and I'm not saying it can't.
I think it's somewhat the question.
So I would say this. So you can accidentally be successful through offering great value to customers, right? Without really defining it and making it super clear. As I said, maybe it's in the mind of the founder, maybe that's sort of gone out and you don't call it brand strategy, maybe it's something else. But at the end of the day, often, you know, it's not good enough, right? Because what happens is if you don't have that strategy where you're analyzing and building all of your operations and your thinking around it, more often than not, you're at a high risk situation because you're going to start splintering off. Usually I find when you've got the original founder in the business, it's kind of okay. They can kind of hold people to account. They explain what they expect. It's when the business really scales, when that founder leaves, when the next generation, the next CEO comes in, that's when it starts to get a bit shaky. When you keep that going, you know, 3, 4, 5 CEOs later, you can really have diluted what you're really about and what you stand for. So you can be successful without defining your brand strategy. You probably have one. You're just probably not calling it that. You are probably offering unique value to the market.
Right. Great answer. I'm going to call out real quick, Farouk. I think an amazing question, but I'm pretty sure it's 135 words and we just can't read it right now. I would recommend connect with Matt and ask that question directly to Matt because I think that you're talking about the business of branding, and I think that Matt is definitely in a position to ask that question. But we do have one more question from Alice, I think. Hello and thank you, Matt. Woohoo. Other than your book, what brand strategy books do you recommend? And I can probably pull them off the shelf as you can right over here, and we have the complete library.
Um, okay. I recommend anything by Marty Neumeier. So the Brand Graph, is a classic. The Brand Flip, Zag. These are all brilliant books. He's my mentor, as I've mentioned. I've been personally mentored by him, so I'd recommend anything by him. So yeah, that's probably who I'd recommend. I could name loads of others, but start with that.
Yeah, I'm going to add a couple too. We had Rob Meyerson on the pod yesterday, so I would recommend Designing Brand Identities with Rob Meyerson and Alina Wheeler, as well as Brand Naming by Rob Meyerson. And then on Friday, we have Joanne Chan from Turner Duckworth, and they have a new book out, which is incredible. I'm a big fan of short essays and aphorisms, and that is definitely one of them. And if you look behind me right over here, I have the 90-Day Brand Plan by Dane Walker. He's a dear friend of, I think, all of ours. He has a great book. And then right over here, Strategy is Your Word by Mark Pollard. If you're in the strategy game, like I am, it'll definitely help you just be concise with your words. Matt, brilliant as always. I expect nothing less. You are an icon in the branding space, and we greatly appreciate your work and the value that you bring, and for being a friend of us at Branders Magazine.
It's an absolute pleasure. You speak too highly of me. I'm just a guy in a room in the middle of the UK. But I'm so happy that I've been able to be here and share some knowledge and some thinking. And I wish everybody the very best in building their brands and managing their meaning. Thank you, everybody, for listening in.
Absolutely. And for more on me, you can check me out at stephenbacanta.com or just type my name in LinkedIn and let's connect there. And for more on Branders Magazine, brandersmagazine.com. Check out our latest issue, which was released last week. And until tomorrow, same bat time and same bat place. We'll see you later. Cheers. Peace out.